Okay, hello. I'm Cara Houchin. I'm the editor for the Staff Canteen. Thank you for joining me for this live discussion about the Scottish hospitality and how it hopes to prevent a tidal wave of business closures and mass redundancies in the sector. As you can see, I've got some great guests on our panel today. So I'll just quickly introduce them. So we've got Tom Kitchin from the Kitchin Group. We've got Dale Dewsbury, restaurant manager at Restaurant Andrew Fairlie.
Hello.
We've got Peter Lederer, who's the chairman of Taste Communications, that obviously has been in the industry for a very long time. So I can't say all of them, so I'll go with that one for now. And then we've got Louise Maclean, director of sales and marketing at the Signature Pub Group, and Chris Shepardson, CEO at EP Business in Hospitality. So before we go on to the discussion, I just want to quickly say that anyone who's watching, if you do want to send any questions, please just add a comment to this post and I will ask as many as I can. So basically the main focus around this discussion is from a letter that I believe most of you have all signed, which was to Nicola Sturgeon, and I want to talk about the points within that letter. So I think probably the best place to start is if we outline what was in it and why you thought it was needed. Peter, I don't know, do you want to start with that?
Yes, certainly. I mean, we thought very clearly that if we are to move on as a sector, as an industry, we need to think about how we do that. And I think it's really important throughout the industry that we are leading the conversation about how we can give customers confidence to come back and how we can set up our businesses to make sure that people do feel confident and comfortable and they still work financially. But it's critical. I think the government has huge issues at the moment, and I worked in government for 9 years as chairman of Visit Scotland. And in that time, I realized that government really does want industry input into a lot of these decisions, but what it tends to get is a lot of inconsistent solutions and recommendations or complaints. So the idea was can we come together as a group and as broad as possible, as big as possible, to try and come up with the answers that might take the business industry forward. Okay.
And Tom, why did you want to sign that and put your name to that and be a part of it?
No, I absolutely everything that Peter's saying there. It's we're very unique here in Scotland. We have everything. People look at us on the outside. The natural beauty, the tourism. All these kind of things. But we're in such damaged limitation here. We're in so much. There's so many problems connected to tourism and the restaurant world, the hotel world, with what's happening. That to have people like Peter leading. And just going to the government and saying, listen, we know there's a lot of problems here. We know you're under pressure. We're here to help. We've brought together these people from the industry, and we're putting forward really positive points of view. And we're trying to think of everyone in Scotland. We're not just thinking of our individual little businesses. We're trying to think of the whole thing, from the wee boy up on the Isle of Skye to the busy restaurants in Edinburgh and Glasgow. And it's very challenging for everyone. We're not here to compare wounds and say, oh, we're worse off than you, blah, blah, blah. But this is serious, because tourism, we're already about to come into June. We're going to miss July. We're going to miss August. And then we're coming into autumn. And then we've got a little bit of Christmas. And then we're in doom of January, February. So the doom is not going away. Do you know what I mean? And we've just got to really try and get things in place to help as many businesses as possible.
Okay. And Dale, you said you're in the restaurant now, aren't you? You've gone over there for this call. So maybe if we can talk about the social distancing measures and how they're feasibly going to work in hospitality.
I think that's a challenge for all of us. For our own restaurant, we're quite lucky. We've got a decent floor space, and maybe we could take on social distancing challenge a little bit easier than most. But even for us, it's a massive impact on how we'll operate. We're a small business. At our capacity, we've got 50 seats. We employ 40 staff. As an equation, that is always going to be difficult to make money if you're not busy. If we've got a self-imposed limit to the capacity, it is going to be incredibly difficult for us to trade under any normal circumstances. So, social distancing does have a massive impact for us, and it's going to have a bigger impact on more volume-led businesses. So to have a voice in in setting the tone for our return. That's that was part of the reason we signed the letter of support, because rather than be dictated to, I would like to think that we could help to set the standard for coming out. Social distancing. I'm looking around the restaurant, and 2 meters. We got to sort of 2 meters distancing between tables before we left, before the close down. But even now, I'm thinking, that there's a couple of tables where that's going to be impossible to achieve, and that's on 2 meters. WHO are working on 1 meter, so I don't know why we're sort of sticking at the 2. The World Health Organization is saying 1 meter is acceptable, so it would seem fair to think that we can apply 1 meter into our businesses.
Yeah, and I mean, even at 1 meter though, Louise, for pubs, obviously that's going to be incredibly difficult, isn't it?
It is. We wanted to be part of this because we consider ourselves quite small. We've got 22 units, but they're all very individually branded. So we consider ourselves a small business. And we've got 700 staff furloughed just now, and we are bringing a few back to work on projects. For one of our pubs is in Edinburgh. It's the Queen's Arms. It's quite well known. It's on Frederick Street. It's the sort of pub that the concierges at the Balmoral and the Cali always recommend people go to. It's a really nice Scottish pub. And its licensed capacity is 300, for when rugby's on and it's a busy day and it's buzzy and it's great. But we've only got 86 seats. And if that goes down to 2 meter spacing and seating only, that pub capacity becomes 21.
Right. Okay. And obviously, so is that feasible business if that happens?
That's why we're really keen to sit down and chat to the government and explain these things, because the Queen's Arms is a pub like hundreds of others across Scotland. It's not unique at all. There's a pub like the Queen's Arms in every village, and that's why we really want to sit and say, here's the reality, and the reality is across the whole sector, from, as Tom said, from Skye to Dumfries. So it's just about putting the facts down, the scenarios, no emotion, just the facts, and how can we work together to get a positive solution.
Yeah, and Chris, I know you did a forum on those kind of challenges, didn't you, and how the sector is going to navigate through this. So what are your thoughts on social distancing and how that's going to work?
Well, going back to Dale's point, I think the view is it'll come down to 1 meter by September. So the question is when we reopen. I think that's number one point. I think the one thing that's coming through from everybody is actually how do we create collaboration? How do we work better together? Because that's not been the bit that's been really touched on. Because everyone's worried about how we're going to come out, but actually how we work together as an industry, as between companies, is going to be the key bit. Because otherwise, everything you hear at the moment is a bit doom and gloom and a bit negative. We've got to start creating a more positive dialogue, which this letter does do. So it's how we create that positive dialogue and start creating solutions is going to be really the next steps, I think.
Yeah. So is there still definitely a disconnect between the hospitality sector and the government and what they're doing? Would you all agree? Because it's all right saying this is how it has to work, but I feel like you're all saying that in practical terms, that's not necessarily the case.
I think at the moment the government, I mean, we're kind of at the end of the list in terms of what's going to open. So they're starting to think about it now, but I don't think they've got any preconceived ideas. They won't have any preconceived ideas. So this is why I thought we all thought that coming together like this and actually looking at it, and actually we've got an advantage because we're not the first. So if you look at, for example, what Australia is doing, what countries in Europe are doing, what in the Far East are doing, there's some common themes coming through, and social distancing, as Chris says, at 1 meter, 1.5, that kind of works. 2 doesn't. 1, you can start to see how it might work. So sitting down with government saying, okay, let's say if it was 1, and if you had set certain rules up about how the traffic moved in, people had to make bookings in advance, and so set some rules down that we can live with and that they can find acceptable, and then I think we can find solutions. And I agree with Chris. It is about, this is an example of collaboration, people coming together for the sake of the industry. We've never been anything, nobody's ever been through anything like this before. We've got to almost take a bit of a clean sheet of paper and look at our spaces, where it doesn't work and say, well, how can we make it work? And if we can do that, then I think we've got good businesses. Not everybody's going to survive, unfortunately. Some people won't be able to do it. But at least let's try and come up with the ideas, because at the moment it's about consumer confidence is first. And until we can make people feel confident about going out again and going into a restaurant, then I think we'll all find it difficult.
Yeah.
I think that's my worry. I think as the shops reopen first, actually the tension in the industry is going to get higher. And actually that's when the redundancies will start. And I think that's the hard bit. And actually it's really important we start that more positive dialogue early, so we can actually lead into that period to actually offer some light as we come out the other side.
Yeah, and the consumer confidence side of it. So like Dale, Tom, how confident do you think people will be to come back to your restaurants, and how do you operate a restaurant under those circumstances and keep consumers happy and keep them coming?
For us so far, there's been a good dialogue between our guests. We've got a really good sort of regular clientele. You know, the communication from them is that they're keen to get back when they can. So I think, I know we are a really sort of quite unique business. You know, so for us, we feel that there's a willingness to come back, and should be relatively easy for us to manage it when we can. It's, more than anything, it's getting the green light to be able to do that. So we're quite upbeat. You know, we're keen to see our guests back in, and I think they're keen to come.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tom.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, without regulars, we're nothing, and you know, we'll be so grateful to see the regulars come through the door again. But in a place like Edinburgh this time of year, and you know, our other business outside Edinburgh in Gullin, you know, the tourism trade is so important. It's so important, and the figures don't really add up as you go on for so many destinations around Scotland that rely on the tourist trade throughout the year. Yes, I'm sure lots of British people will be coming, but it's when are they coming, and will it be too late to help, you know, keep these businesses going? That's what we worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I know that's one of the other points was the loss of income from overseas travellers, wasn't it? So how big do you think this loss is expected to be? I don't know who wants to take that question.
I don't know any figures. I couldn't possibly say how much the figures are, but I think it will be felt across the whole of Scotland, especially out with the main cities. But, you know, it just depends if we can get people travelling again, you know, because if we can get people up the West Coast in early August, that's great. But if it's not July, August, it quickly changes the weather up here, you know.
Yeah. Anyone else got any points on the overseas travel?
I think we have to certainly, again, in Edinburgh, take cognizance of the fact there's no Edinburgh Festival. That's a 30% boost into our sales from July to August. We've got 11 units in Edinburgh City Centre. So that's 30% increase in revenue from July to August. We see that's sad, but totally understandable. And then the other one's Christmas. Christmas can be 50% of an increase from November. So we're looking at a 30% drop in August and a 50% drop in Christmas, because how do we do Christmas parties? How do we do office nights out? You know, how do you do social distancing when you're trying to have a wee hoolie for Hogmanay? You know, there's like, I don't know. I lie in my bed at night, and these are the things I'm thinking about. You know, not just myself, of course, but yeah, I think there's a lot. There's numbers out there that the tourism is definitely going to play a part in.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. I mean, if you look at the Edinburgh Tattoo, for example, alone, it contributes about 70 million into Edinburgh's economy every August. And then the festival on top of that, which is hundreds of millions. So I think the impact in the cities, and Glasgow is very similar, and beyond. And the issue about getting open too, if I've been talking in the Highlands, some of the issues is about how the communities are going to feel about tourists coming back. So there's a confidence. We've got to give confidence to the communities as well as confidence to the customers, and that confidence is going to come with how confident we are and how responsive we are as an industry in thinking about how we put things together to make people feel confident. So I think we have, this is again us taking the lead as an industry, and it's really important, and not waiting for government to tell us what to do, because why would they know better than us? And we are the experts, so we need to really show the way.
I mean, that's a really interesting point, because we did a session on this last week, and I assumed rural economies would be grateful for the extra business. Actually, what we found was the opposite. They don't want it. They don't want extra people going there. They don't want the people bringing a threat, as they perceive it, to them. So how do we find that balance between cities losing people and the rural economies not wanting them? So the whole thing becomes a bit of a negative cycle. So yeah, how we build trust again will be crucial.
Yeah, and I've not heard anyone say it from that way around. It's all been very much about how do we get customers back in, rather than we don't want people here.
I know. I was quite shocked, actually, I have to say.
Yeah.
But there's quite a lot of stories about people barricading even visitors going into the village. So it is an issue.
Wow. Okay, that's a really interesting point that I'd not heard of. So, yeah, obviously confidence is and trust is really important, but there's the other sides of it to keep businesses afloat while we're getting to that point. And I know one of them was the furlough scheme, which I think we all agree was brilliant when it happened and was what we needed. But now I don't know about everyone here, but it now feels like we're back a little bit in limbo. We're not really sure exactly what that next step's gonna look like just yet. But I know it was in your letter. So when you say extend it, how do you see that extension, and what do you think you need? I don't know who wants to take that one first.
Well, I think which is important is whether the employer is going to have it to contribute to the wages, you know, and when that's going to happen. I'm not sure, that's not been said yet. I'm not sure, but you know, as soon as the employers have to start contributing to the wages, and the furlough scheme is stacking up. You know, it's not free, the furlough scheme. You know, the expenses are adding up every day. You know. And it's how many businesses, if they have to start contributing to the furlough scheme but can't open, how much money do they have and how long can that go on for? And I think that's where it will really start to kick in to people, just how serious this is.
I would like to see the furlough scheme certainly extended. Looking forward to this week to seeing it explained. As Tom was saying, there's still quite a bit we don't know. And the main word is flexibility. So if employers, if we want to go and trial something, some revenue generating scheme, wee bit of innovation, we're not a business, we don't do takeaway, we don't have the margins to do delivery or Just Eat or anything. We're dipping our toe in it now because we very much see that as something that's going to be here to stay. It would be good to be able to bring back a member of staff to do a few hours, to unfurlough them, but and pay them, but still not have. We couldn't afford to bring someone back full time to work 7 or 8 hours. Do you know? So it's that flexibility of still being allowed a degree of part-time working with furlough. That would be. I kind of need that.
I believe that's what's going to get announced. I think it came out this morning. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Is that you can bring people back to work, but you have to pay 25% of the furlough, but the rest will be paid by government.
Okay.
I think that's what they're aiming to announce. So you could actually get people doing quite a lot of work and still be supported as we recover. But that's to be confirmed, I hasten to add.
Yeah.
I also think there's a good case for our industry going forward, that it gets a longer tail of help, if you like, than others. You know, I'm involved in other sectors and things like retail, and you can see those kind of getting back up and running. But our sector will take longer, and to have some kind of tail, even if it's dropping over time, for our industry would certainly, I think, help a lot of businesses survive. Without then I think the situation really doesn't look good for many businesses.
Yeah. Dale, what about you? Obviously, you will have people on furlough. So what's the feeling there?
I think your flexibility and support, you know, if we're going to have to limit our numbers of diners and our revenue, I don't want to be laying people off, you know, we're determined that we won't. But if we're going to be forced to limit our business, the only way that we can do that with the team in place is if there is ongoing support. So I think, you know, even once the team's back in and we are open and starting to trade with some degree of normality, I think, you know, there's got to be some sort of leg up from the government. Otherwise, you know, as an industry, we're just delaying the inevitable. You know, everybody's being kept employed, and that is fantastic. You know, I think the government were brilliant in that respect. But it is just putting off the inevitable, because everybody comes back and is empty, and we can't trade. You know, there's just going to be endless redundancies. So for me, it is that flexibility to say, okay, we understand that we're imposing a limit on your business. We'll help you with, you know, with your payroll. And, you know, as a business, it's our expectation that we're going to pay our team. But in the meantime, whilst we're forced to trade in smaller numbers, you know, we need some help. Let's say, we are an unusual business. You know, there's 50 seats and 40 staff. And there's not many businesses that work on that ratio. If we can only operate at 50% of our capacity, that 40 staff suddenly looks like a huge number, and we don't want to let them go. We don't want to lose them. So I think, you know, flexibility there to help us with that would be invaluable to us, and every other business. Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously, I mean, the Chancellor seemed pretty adamant that October would be the end of it when he obviously made his last announcement. So I know we're all a little bit in limbo, but that is quite quite a full stop, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, it said, you know, there would be no cliff edge, but, you know, for hospitality, you're just delaying the cliff edge, I suppose. If the support just suddenly end in October, you know, we'll miss our high season. You know, the tap gets turned off in October, and we're all looking at sort of semi-empty restaurants and trying to get through the fallow period of autumn winter. And I just think that would be suicidal for our industry.
Yeah.
Oh, look, it's going to be difficult, isn't it? I mean, I think they're estimating 1 in 3 jobs being lost in Scotland's hospitality. I think that's probably about the figure. So it's actually, how can that be protected? And that's why I think it goes back to what you, in terms of the letter, how you actually collaborate. And actually, one of the things that came out in our thing is, even can you get the public sector and private sector working better together up in Scotland to signpost different jobs, and how can you actually get everyone working better is actually, I think, what we have to try and do. Because it's very unlikely they're going to go far beyond October, I suspect.
Yeah, and also that I know the other thing is rent holidays, or pausing of rent, as well as a help to everybody. How long is long enough in terms of that? Because how long do you pause, or would you like to be paused for on that, so that you can get businesses back up and running?
I think we need a rent-free period. You know, it's coming more and more, staring us in the face that if a lot of these businesses are going to survive, you only need, I don't know, 12 months rent-free. But of course, that's a knock-on effect to the landlord. So it's just dominoes. It's just like the wounds. Everyone's got these wounds, and they don't know which, you know, who's the worst, you know. And but rent-free rates, business rates, VAT, these are the things that are going to save businesses.
And so how do we get everyone on the same page then, Tom? Because like you said, you know, you want a rent freeze, but then you have the knock-on effects of that, of obviously the landlords, and they need to pay the things they need to pay as well. So how do we...
The thing is as well, though, if you think from the landlord's point of view, if your business goes out, or a business goes out of goes into liquidation or whatever, the new tenant coming in is going to want 12 months rent free anyway, you know, to take on the site. So it's a very difficult situation for everyone, and these are the conversations that need to be had, because we all have to. We're giving, but we've got nothing coming in to help us make any decisions, and there's no green lights showing us the way to go.
Yeah, and I suppose as a landlord, the last thing you want is to be left with a load of businesses that have gone bust on your hands.
Exactly,
really.
And like I said, any new tenant who's going to take them over is going to want a rent-free period anyway. Yeah. And they're going to renegotiate much better rates.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Any comments on how that maybe there's a way of everyone working together on that one?
Well, again, I think, as Chris said, it is about having the conversations. I mean, too often you know, we get into situations where something like this happens. We all talk amongst ourselves, government talks amongst themselves, and we don't like the outcome. This is an opportunity for everybody to sit down and say, okay, maybe rent rent-free doesn't work, but maybe we can do something on VAT, or maybe VAT doesn't work, but maybe we can do something on it. What can we do rather than, I mean, we can't have everything, I'm sure, because as Tom says, there are knock-on effects to most decisions. But to save the industry and to give the industry a chance, I think the working together with government, and we mustn't forget, it's not just us, it's, I mean, our suppliers. There's a whole supply chain behind us that are falling over as well, potentially, if we don't, if we're not open. If you look at what happens in farming at the moment, milk and other products, because our sector's closed, has a huge impact on the supply chain. So it's much bigger than just the restaurants and hotels. It goes on and on throughout the economy.
Yeah, and Tommy, you mentioned VAT as well as being something that needs to be addressed. So what would be an ideal kind of number for that if you were in it?
No, I think we're looking for some kind of VAT reduction to take us through to 2021 kind of thing. But like Peter says, it could be VAT, it could be rent, it could be something. We just need little leaves, you know, like trees to hang off to give us hope. Yeah, it's just trying to get the positivity. We're all trying to find this positivity, like Chris says, and we're all like, come on, our businesses thrive on positivity, but it's just trying to get, you know, each one is just like, oh shit, you know, like, oh dear.
Yeah, and so you deal with one and then you think about something else.
Yeah, because like Peter says, the knock-on effect to the suppliers is just like, it's just they can't continue much longer like this. It's great, they're all thinking outside the box, they're doing home deliveries, this and that, but they need the hospitality sector back because they will not survive.
Yeah,
we were even something as innocuous as lobster. Actually, did I just say lobster's innocuous? I'm sorry, shoot me down. But last year we were buying lobster. We were doing a lobster roll, which I'd seen abroad and brought it home, and it is amazing. And we're getting them 16, 18 quid from our supplier down in Dunbar. And this year we got them for the weekend, and they were £10. Because they're not going to Spain, they're not going up to the west coast to the Three Chimneys, you know, they're not going anywhere. So the prices have come right down. Great for the consumer, but not so good for the farmer, and not so good for the consumer if there's no outlet for them to get it.
Yeah. No, like the numbers that they're looking at, like the losses are huge. Just to talk about them for a minute. I know obviously that they're huge for all different sectors, but having talked to some suppliers, they're doing home deliveries and things like that, but they're just not producing anywhere near the revenue that they were. So yeah, so I don't know, Dale, what about is suppliers? Do you talk to suppliers? Are you still in touch with those?
Yeah, I mean, myself and Stevie, our head chef, more than myself, you know, these guys, you know, you've turned off their outlet of supply, you know, fishmonger, butcher, cheesemonger, you know, we are a big part of their annual business, and we've disappeared overnight. You know, certainly there is a domestic market that is eating differently, so that, you know, they may be doing more home deliveries. You know, our fishmonger's, you know, delivering direct. He's never dealt with a public direct. He's always been a wholesaler, so he's working in a completely different way. But it can't sustain their business long term. You know, they need to, you know, to find this avenue reopen again, and you know, we want to be there. Just in terms of that, you know, looking at what, you know, other nations are already leading on that. You know, Belgium you know, they're reopening their shops are open, their restaurants are reopening. Their government's dropped their VAT by about half. I think they were about the same rate as us. I think 21%. They've dropped it by, you know, by 9%. Greece have done the same. You know, literally halved their VAT to their hospitality industry. So it's not impossible to do, and hopefully, you know, our government will look at that and think, you know, it's one of the automatic ways that we can help. And you know that we're in a situation where every little will help. You know, so if they could give us relief on that, it will be massive.
Okay. I've got a question from Peter McKenna at the Gannet. He said, has there been a date set to sit down with the government? He's following your letter.
I know.
Not as yet, but we're following that up at the moment. But there are, we're looking at several, because there's more than, we've got to think of different levels of government too. So we're also looking at, can we find a way of maybe a pilot program with Edinburgh, for example? Can we sit down with Edinburgh Council or Stirling Council or Glasgow, and maybe we'll set up a pilot, because that might help, again, build this confidence that if it works as a pilot project, you can then move it out to the rest of the country. So it's local government, it's Scottish government, it's UK government. They're all, you've got to be talking to all levels of government at this point. And just, as I say, putting out this, Chris's point about this collaborative approach, we want to be part of the solution. It's really important that we have a lot to obviously say. We are the professionals, we are the experts, and we have, you know, some great people around the table with great profiles who are trusted people. So I think that those kind of trusted individuals who are running great businesses should be the leaders in talking to government about what some of those solutions might look like. And as I say, I was just reading something that's just come into me from Australia, and how the restaurants and cafes in Victoria are getting up and running. And there's a very sensible list of recommendations and what venues, what they have to do, and then there's a series of recommendations. Very simple. Much of it left to the business to decide, because let's face it, we spend every day of our lives in all our businesses worrying about people's health, safety, and well-being. It's no different now. That's what we're used to doing. So we don't need too much if you think about it. So when you start to see these recommendations, you think, well, actually, that makes a lot of sense. It should be possible for us to do the same with our governments, both local and national.
Yeah. And one of the other points on the list is the COVID quality assurance scheme. What exactly is that for people that are watching, and what would that involve?
Peter, is that not, that was something that it kind of came up on a call about how let's not compete on hygiene. You know, as hospitality businesses, we compete on many levels, you know, in terms of cuisine, in terms of marketing, in terms of staff friendliness. We're compete on every possible level of human interaction. Let's just establish the protocols. Let's establish what is the right quality assurances to give our customers in terms of reassuring in terms of hygiene, and reassuring in terms of measurement, that we are taking this so seriously. We want them to stay safe. So it's having one scheme that we all sign up to, like a code of conduct. We all sign up to, and we all just agree to it. And then for no one's, you know, we're not competing on who's got the best hand sanitizer. You know, we've all just got the absolute best regulated hand sanitizer the market has. Okay. But I'm sure Peter could probably say that more eloquently than me.
No, you know, absolutely, Louise. And it's about, and again, it comes back to my point about the customer, giving the customer confidence. And if there is, it's fairly simple to come up with a good code of conduct that I'm sure we would all sign up to. And when you've got people like Tom and Dale and Louise, you know, people respected in their sectors leading the way, I think that would be relatively, and it doesn't need a lot of bureaucracy. A code of conduct is a good way to describe it. You know, we've all signed up to this code of conduct. All our restaurants, all our hotels, bars, all meet this criteria. And if you see this tick on the door or whatever, we've signed up to that. It's not rocket science. We don't need a government department to be set up to run it. I think we can do it ourselves. But if government wants to help us with the green tick, and that they've looked at the scheme and have approved it, great. But again, we don't want, I would suggest, a government scheme is not what you want, because it will be very bureaucratic, very complicated, and you won't like everything in there, I suspect.
Asking on Facebook, would a self-regulated hygiene code work? Do you think? Are you confident that it would work?
Well, I think just quickly on that, I think there's no one scheme that's going to fit all, but I do think, so for restaurants, you know, if I go to Tom's restaurant and it's got the tick on the door, I absolutely trust that a restaurant like that is going to look after me. If I go to Louise's pubs, you know, I know they've thought about these things. They've got a code of conduct. They've got practices. It's printed there for me to read and see. Then maybe they check my temperature as I walk in the door. Maybe they take my name and email address in case there's any problem and they let me know. Whatever they do, they're giving me that confidence to go out again. And I mean, I would go to a restaurant tomorrow. It wouldn't worry me, as I think a lot of young people will go to restaurants tomorrow. If you're 70 plus with an underlying lung condition, you probably won't be going to a restaurant in the near future. So I think it's not the whole population we're looking to, but I think there's no system that will be right for everybody. But I think if restaurants can come up with their scheme, hotels might have a different regime. If you look at the big hotel companies, they're coming up with very good protocols about how they're going to clean the hotel, what the standard is going to be in the hotel, and what the customer can expect. And that's what we need to do in restaurants as well. Yeah.
And Tom, are you positive that the industry will recover, that it will come back?
Of course, we have to be positive that we'll come back, but I do think it's going to take an almighty dent, and I think it will take a long time to come back from this. I mean, even next year, I think it will take another year on top of that to get back to where we were, before this all happened. But we're fighters. We're fighters. We all love hospitality. We live and breathe what we do, and we're not going to give up. And if some restaurants have to start again, they have to start again. And I'm sure it'll all come good in the end. But just now it's certainly very challenging for many.
Yeah. And Chris, are there any other kind of points that we haven't discussed that you think are key to navigating out of this?
Well, I think one of the things that particularly why I wanted to be involved in this, I think the letter's a good example of what industry can do, and actually start having that positive dialogue full stop. Because I do think, particularly for young people, there's been a lack of voice in terms of reassuring them that there is a future after this. Because there is a future. We in 2020 probably did a write-off, but 2021 we will see recovery happen in one way or another. And actually we need to retain the young talent that we're potentially going to lose. And actually not enough is being said about that. And I just think we need to be doing that. We've kind of left the most vulnerable, or the youngest ones who carry the student debt and everything else, to take a lot of the hit that's coming their way. And I just think it's time to make sure they know there's a future as well. So I think I think the letter's a great example. I just think we need more leadership voices at the moment, so actually reassuring people that there is a future after this. And that's really what I see.
Yeah. Okay. And probably a final question. If we've kind of covered this with restricting covers, so for social distancing, if we do that, is that going to mean a price increase from the restaurant point of view?
Would have thought so. Because I think it'll be a knock-on. I think there'll be supply chain issues. I think there'll be issues. I think getting products in. I think inevitably there will be price increases. I'm kind of watching the coffee shops. I'm sort of got one eye on the Starbucks and the Costa. That's my barometer. So I'd be quite interested to see the elasticity there is in coffee, because I'm not sure there's much elasticity in hospitality at the moment.
Okay, and all in agreement with that, then that inevitably there are going to be increases that are going to be passed on.
I think it'd be impossible for us to be seen to be increasing our prices at this point. I think everybody's looking at, they're desperate to get back into a restaurant environment, but I don't think they should be. I don't think we can pass on price rises. I think we're at sort of a watershed in the industry, and certainly we are going to lose people in the industry. They are. We've taken a lot of hits over the last decade. Food prices we've never paid as much for produce as we pay now. We've never paid as high a rate of for our colleagues, and rightly so. We've addressed pay issues in an industry that was notoriously bad for it. We've taken a lot of those hits. I don't think now is the time to pass on a hike in prices to our returning customers. I just don't think they can manage that. I don't think they'll take it. If they see us cynically putting prices up, I just don't think they'll support us. But prices are going to, you know, I think we will certainly be hit ourselves with increased expenses, but I don't think now is the time to pass those on to our diners, because I just don't think they'll take it.
Okay, Tom, what about yourself?
Yeah, no, I do think prices we'll have to go through them with a fine tooth comb, and you know, if I look at our businesses, like for example, Scran and Scally, which is very much an everyday restaurant, we'll have to look at, because you know, you're sticking to principles of using the produce that you've always used, the wild fish, the seasonal, all this kind of stuff, the best produce you can. We will try our utmost to keep the prices the same, but at the same time, we're going to have to look at business, and we have to look at the businesses and make sure that they're running a minimal break even, and that we'll only be able to see that when we start to know exactly how we can operate and how many people we can get through the doors and what the consumer's thinking. Are they coming to visit?
Yeah. Okay. Well, obviously the Lederer, and then Chris, or your points as well. These are all like first really positive steps of, as Peter said, getting voices heard that need to be heard, who know what they're talking about, to make sure that the government knows what you guys need. So fingers crossed that they will listen, and you will get to start sitting down and having those discussions. So I don't have any more questions. I don't know if anyone has any more points that they want to add before I wrap it up. Anyone, or are you all good?
No. Good, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time. Thank you for answering all the questions. I hope the viewers found it as interesting and helpful as I did. I know it's always a difficult conversation to have, because we're still very much in limbo in a lot of aspects, but it's great to actually hear your views. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.